So before we can design an experience like this, we really have to understand who it is that we are creating that experience for. And I don't actually think that this is that much of an aha moment for instructional designers or LXDs. I think often when stakeholders come to us and they say, hey, we have to roll out new training, part of our analysis process, generally our intake process with Addie, with Sam, is usually, okay, yeah, who are the learners? I think most instructional designers do think about it from that perspective. But the thing is, we tend to kind of keep things pretty surface level, or at least at a department level, really kind of relying heavily on whatever the stakeholder is telling us about who the learners are. It's really infrequent that we're actually able to dive in deeper. So here is who the stakeholders think the learner is. And I just wanted to really visualize this. We often see the stakeholders referring to the learners as their employees, right? It's the sales team, or this is the customer excellence team, or these are new managers, but they're looking at it from the lens of they work here, they're our employee. However, this is who the learner actually is. They're people, right? They have a life, they have pets, they take different modes of transportation, they may like sports, they may read books. What are their preferences? What are their communication styles? Where are they from? We know that this is a human, and that's why it's so important for us to think about that. They have lives and they have experiences outside of work, and that will strongly influence how they show up and how they receive our course. So really approaching our LXD work in this learner-centric way is key to successful design. And we can't just rely on the stakeholders to get us there. We have to do a little bit more heavy lifting on our end. So how do we do this? Through building empathy, my friends. Empathy is at the core of all meaningful connections. It helps us better understand and connect with our users and our learners, and help us design much, much more meaningful learning experiences. So this is really the name of the game when it comes to LXD. This is why you're here. You want to know how to build empathy with your learners. I'm excited to share that with you. And so how do we do it? We do that through creating a user persona, or a learner persona in our case. Let's talk a little bit more about what these are and what that really entails. Okay. So what are user personas? Some folks may have seen something like this before, but personas are fictional, sort of archetypal users whose goals represent a larger group of users. And so this could be a single person that represents an entire department. Really what this winds up doing is it helps us answer the question, who are we designing for? Who are the learners? And I want to mention here that user personas are not a dynamically novel concept. Product designers, UX designers, UI designers, business people, copywriters, marketers, all use some form of personas when it comes to creating whatever it is that they're pushing out. They're thinking really, really diligently about how to connect with their audience in this way. So I'll mention, I think it's a little funny that LXD is so late to the game here when it comes to being able to connect with our learners. It just seems like this really beautiful connection piece. And it's not that it's not being done, it's just not very commonly done. And my hope and dream is that we can start to put this into practice a little bit more to really make those learning experiences a little bit more impactful. So let's talk more about what's actually included on a learner persona here. And I want to say user personas really vary depending on whatever your use case is. So this is just an idea, but these are the types of things that you might see included. And so first, we have a name. That's the most important thing. You have to name your persona. We need to be able to communicate with them by addressing them. Hey, in this case, Mo, how are you today, Mo? It just helps to really personify the idea of this entire group down to a single person. When I'm talking to Mo, I'm more than likely able to speak to the group that Mo represents. So they're this representative. Add a picture. That's really important. And I know here we're talking in our cute little illustrated style. So Mo is a cartoon here. But in your user persona, adding an actual photo of whoever it is that you've chosen to represent your group will be really important to do. And I actually think this is really fun to go on and search for just the perfect photo to represent your user group. Basic information is huge here. So age, occupation. In my case here, you see I've added department type and worker type, communications preference, because I've made this to be more learner-centric. Other types of other types of user personas may not include that, especially if this was for an external audience. We wouldn't necessarily care that they worked for, say, the brand studio. But in this case, it's useful. Personal information is helpful so that we just paint a better picture of who this person really is. So marital status, married, partnered, single, what's their deal? Divorced, widowed? Do they have kids? And if so, what ages are they? Do they have pets? Where are they located? Location is enormous, especially if we're creating for an audience outside of just the United States. Is our content localized? That's important. Will we add subtitles? That's important to know. Also time zones. If we've got lots of different things that are happening, webinars, how are we going to accommodate not just US based time zones, but we've got European time zones, we've got Asian time zones. How are we going to really think about that? So that's important. Behaviors. So this is enormous. This is really big for UX and UI and marketing. I would argue that this is just as important for learning design, which is social media. Like where are they interacting with people today? Is it Instagram? Is it Facebook? Is it TikTok? No, that's a thing. And a lot of people are on there, and that's how they're used to receiving information. So we really want to think through that. When it comes to news media, what's getting folks' attention? Usually something is hot off the press and folks are getting, pulled in. What tactics are these news sites using to get them in? Is it a push notification? Do they just have their TVs on all the time? Are they, subscribed to an actual newspaper that gets dropped off on their doorstep? Sometimes folks do that still. And so we want to know about that. Transportation, are they taking a car? Are they taking a bus? Are they taking a train? That type of thing can help us to understand, well, they have some extra time. Maybe mobile learning would be right for them. Maybe a podcast. Maybe they can't participate, face to face, but they can listen. Hobbies, what do they like to do in their spare time? Maybe we can create a course that's a little bit more catered to their preferences. We can add a theme or use verbiage or references that really might be more relatable. Brands, so where are they shopping? What are the types of things that they're used to getting? We can then use that information to really try to influence our own design and follow suit so that we can kind of capture their attention in that same way. Goals and frustrations. These are really interesting. And again, really generally more focused in a user experience setting as we're trying to really define the problem and come up with a solution. But I think it's important to think about this when it comes to learning experience design too. And so you'll see in all of my examples that we'll walk through, the goals and frustrations pertain to work. Like they pertain to what are their goals at work? What are their frustrations at work? Because generally speaking, when we're building training, at least for an internal audience, we are trying to solve for that. We have to do whatever the stakeholder is asking us to do and also serve our learner. And so we have to work within these goals and frustrations. So thinking through that is important. Another component of learner profiles that I like to think through is personality. Many of us are from a corporate environment where we have training opportunities to do something like color training, insights training, Myers-Briggs. Here I've used Ocean. There are a lot of different little profiles or archetypes that our corporate companies are already putting forward to help us think about ourselves and the people we work with in a more unique way. So why not leverage that same information here? Why not really glean those same insights to help us with our own course creation? So I use Ocean here so I can see a little bit more about what folks are all about in terms of openness, conscientiousness, their extroversion level, their agreeableness, their neuroticism. That just helps me paint a little bit of a picture. And then, but I recommend that you do whatever works for you. And then technology, especially today, in today's world, I just need to know, how tech savvy are these folks? Are they familiarized with IT? Do they use social? How great are they at software? Because if these numbers are low, I need to be able to know it and appreciate and design to that rather than trying to force them into something that just isn't going to feel comfortable. So this is really, really important. I also like to throw in communication here. This is a piece that I think is super important for internal communication. And I bring this up because just very recently I started a position where no one reads their email. Everybody is in Slack. And this is huge because notifications about courses are going to email, this like a dark abyss that no one ever checks. That I've seen as a problem. So how might we think through that? How do we notify folks that they have something to do, especially if it's a compliance course? So this is all big. This is just the type of information that's often included. What I want to mention here is that the most valuable user personas are based upon meaningful research. The whole field of UX design, there's an entire subsection of it that's dedicated to user research in particular. We don't have time. Like, that's just like the short end of it is, as instructional designers, we're barely coming around to the idea that, oh, wait, we kind of create products too, just like all these other tech teams. But we're slow to the game. And we just don't have time. And very rarely will our stakeholders allow us the time. The reason why UX and UI is allowed to spend the money, the resources doing those types of deep insights is usually because they're building a product that ultimately they're going to sell, that the company can then make money off of. For our case, we're generally trying to scramble to make up for a deficit in some way. So it's just the timing is just not allowed, right? But all is not lost. What I think we can do is get really scrappy and really creative. We can start based off of some assumptions and people that we know, especially those we've worked with, those that we've seen around, independent research, internal stakeholder reviews, subject matter expert interviews. This is just, it's what winds up happening. And again, I said this is part of our analysis generally, but we can go deeper. We can partner more closely with our stakeholder to understand, how do we find out more? In fact, you could even potentially build out a learner persona with your stakeholder. That could be a really cool exercise with them. Hey, this is who you're saying this person is. Can we actually validate this? I have this template here. Let's walk through this together. Or could you maybe give this a go at filling this out to the best of your degree? Who are your top 2 learners? And let's try to talk about them in a little bit more detail. So just wanted to kind of bring that up. So now that you kind of have a little bit of an overview over what user personas and learner personas are, I'm curious to hear from the group again. What really are the benefits of using user personas or learner personas for ID work or for LXD work? How could you see that this might benefit you in your own day-to-day? Feel free to drop your answers in the chat. So Julie says, I love the examples you gave about mobile for commuters and emails getting lost by learners with thousands of emails. Yes. I think this is especially huge. I think about this with Gmail's tabs. So many things get lost in my updates tab that are important. And especially from, say, a course that I may have bought online, maybe that's just sort of gotten lost and I need to whitelist their email address, but I was never told to do that. So I don't do that. And then it's just gone forever. So I think that's really huge. And yeah, mobile for commuters, that's interesting. I think podcasting and listening to talks often now instead of having to be live or do video, I can see that being, very impactful. So maybe a little bit more audio focused or read, So Gail says, I like to think what I am building is being absorbed and may hit its mark versus just being seen as another training. Yes. Oh, this is huge. I think as instructional designers, I certainly felt this way. Sometimes I just feel kind of deflated, like I'm an order taker just trying to push something out to check a box to make my stakeholder happy. And I know it's not going to be good for the learner and it doesn't feel very good. And it can feel very demoralizing that our work just isn't having an impact. I think a lot of us get into this work to have a huge impact. And then once we see, well, it's not really doing much, it's easy to get jaded. So I love that, Gail. Hitting its mark is huge. And I like to think of that as a partnership with not only the learner that you basically have agreed, to advocate for when you take on this type of role, but also with the stakeholder. You want to build a strong relationship with them. You want to appease them, but you know a little bit more about what's involved in the process. So Julie says it builds a better relationship with the learner. It absolutely does. I think at this point, especially, folks are burned by online learning. They've just had a ton of it and so much of it has not been good. So much of it has been pushed. I actually think that COVID, side tangent, has not done great things for online training because, we used to spend 2-3 months creating a course really intentionally and producing it with a lot of effort and energy, knowing that, hey, online training is going to really help us. We're going to get people out of the classroom and it's going to help us scale. But then we just did it so fast. It was not good and people don't want it anymore. I'm seeing sort of this shift that folks want more in-person experiences rather than on demand. And so it's sort of an aha moment for me as well. So these are great answers. I love it. And I'd like to do a little bit more of a deep dive, if you're willing, to exploring what is involved in how we can actually use these personas for learning. I love that you have said that. Let's go a little bit further. Let's look at a few different learner paths.